You should be able to see my screen now, if you could not before. And what you should be seeing is the monkeypox outbreak maps. So we do know that there is a multinational monkeypox outbreak going on. And one of the great things about Gideon is that our maps are updated daily. So you will be able to see kind of active and new cases that are popping up with the use of Gideon. So you can kind of see where everything is happening. And you can kind of actually view and see stuff all the way back from 1981 when the first case that we got was here. And one of the ones that I find interesting being from the United States is the actual outbreaks that were happening here in kind of the edge of the Midwest. And we can actually click on these and we're able to see how many cases there are. And from there, we can actually check out what monkeypox was like in the US and where some of these notable outbreaks have taken place. So there's a lot of really great stuff that you can do with Gideon. Obviously, I'm biased, but I do think it's a really useful tool for any kind of public health groups, especially when it comes to stuff like these new outbreaks that are popping up and seeing some of the historical outbreaks and using that to model and determine where things might be headed is really useful. So from this and all of this kind of fun stuff, I like to start off with trivia. I'm a big trivia nerd. I love it. I absolutely I can't get enough of trivia. So I wanted to ask you guys a quick question. So I have a little poll for you, and the poll is going to ask you which vaccine works against monkeypox. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes here so that we can get a couple of answers in there, and go ahead and put in your choice for what vaccine you think is effective against monkeypox. And then I'm going to pass it to Dr. Berger, who will talk about what vaccines are effective against monkeypox, as well as a whole lot of other really interesting and fun stuff about it.
So do I share my screen now, Kim? Is that?
Yes, yeah, you should be able to. I think that I've got mine turned off now.
One thing I should tell you guys right off the bat is I am terrible with computers. And if you've heard of Murphy's Law, I am Murphy. I'm the guy. Okay. Most people answer smallpox. That's interesting. I'm showing you a screen which we'll come back to many times. This is sort of the main navigating screen of Gideon. And what is Gideon? We'll be coming back to that very question a little later. But I'm going to go, just for the sake of that question, I'm going to the Explore module, which has submodules talking about the diseases, the drugs, the bugs, the vaccines in the country. So we're going, of course, to the vaccines. I should say that there are 88 human vaccines on the planet as of this morning. 88, that's the number, generic vaccines. And not all of them are household terms. I often present this material to experts in infectious disease. And more than once I've been told, oh, you made this up, Steve. Is it April Fool's? I'll give you an example, then we'll get right into it. But Gideon follows every disease, every vaccine, and every disease and everything else, but every vaccine, as I said, on the planet. So you should know that there's an Argentine hemorrhagic fever vaccine, which strangely enough is used in Argentina. And there's a here's the one, this is the one they stop you on, forest vaccine. You've heard of that disease, of course. It's used only in Southwest India. It's a commercial vaccine and they do very well by it. They have a big outbreak right now. It's as big as monkeypox, but why it's more a matter of politics and economics, why you haven't heard of that one. And there's an enterovirus 71 vaccine. I'm sure you're not using this one lately. And there are several others, we just don't have time. That one's used mostly in China, where that's an extremely important pathogen, causes lots of bad stuff. And we're looking for the monkeypox vaccine. Now, historically, given the name of the vaccine, historically, monkeypox has been around for many years, but it was always quiet. And one of the reasons that it became quiet after the 70s and 80s is that people were getting smallpox vaccine. Anybody over the age of 70 or so in developed countries has had a smallpox vaccine. And the smallpox vaccine has a immunologic crossover with monkeypox. It will protect against monkeypox. And lo and behold, we were smart enough to eliminate smallpox, and therefore we've eliminated the smallpox vaccine. Nobody uses it anymore. And lo and behold, nature is very unforgiving. It's coming back with another disease. And that next disease, of course, is monkeypox. This is the vaccine that's currently being talked about for smallpox, for monkeypox as a smallpox, monkeypox combination vaccine. And I won't read all this to you, but it's a very straightforward kind of vaccine. It's not going to be used for everybody. The reasons being economic for one thing, because what company is really going to put in $500 million or whatever it takes to develop a vaccine against this disease, which everybody's sort of hoping or thinking is going to disappear in the next couple of months. So, but it is around, and there are people who should get it, namely people who work with the vaccine, obviously, with the virus. So there are people out there who are working with monkeypox virus or vaccinia virus. Vaccinia virus is the smallpox virus vaccine, or cowpox, which was the virus that led to vaccinia. And it's a straightforward kind of vaccine, very few side effects actually, and this is the one you'll be hearing about. Having got into the vaccine, I'll back up. You remember we were talking about the Explore module. We were in vaccines, and I think we won't be coming back into this one for a while. But I want to get into something I like, my favorite module, which is the diagnosis module. Gideon is designed to help healthcare professionals diagnose disease. I'm very careful with the English because it does not diagnose. No, you can't say Gideon diagnoses anything. And in fact, there is no program yet developed in any field which will make a diagnosis. It makes a ranked differential diagnosis, meaning when you put in signs and symptoms, we'll do that in a minute, Gideon asks what diseases cause those signs and symptoms, how common are the diseases themselves, how common are the signs and symptoms in the diseases. Sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually a simple formula, multiplies all that out and gives you a list of diseases ranked by probability, by statistical probability. And that whole thing is called Bayesian analysis. When you say that, people, they're afraid to ask questions after that, so I always mention it. So let's make a diagnosis here. There are two ways to do it. One way is to go through an algorithm. It just takes time to go through this. The algorithm says, well, if the person has fever, what do you do now? Well, if he has a rash and a fever, what do you do now? It's more for students and trainees, and I'd have you look at it if you have a chance. I'm going to get into my favorite module, which is this one. And we'll say we have someone, what's a good country here? We'll say someone from England. Because there is some, and when you say England, of course, it goes to the United Kingdom. Or if you say London, it will go in. It has all the synonyms. And having said just the fact that someone is in England, there's already a list of diseases. This is the differential diagnosis of someone in England without any symptoms, if you realize that. So it's not very accurate, but the common cold is on top. That's the common one, right? It's a common disease with common symptoms in England. So let's put in some real signs and symptoms here. We have someone with a rash. We'll say a diffuse rash. And as soon as I say rash, Gideon opens a box to ask me questions, saying, wait a minute, you said rash. What do you mean? So and these are rather technical. There are synonyms for this as well. In other words, if you're a non-medical person or mommy at home with a child who's sick, you can also put in itchy rash or runny nose or that kind of terminology, and Gideon accepts it. It happens to have the medical terms on this list, but you could put in, as I say, itchy and runny, and it will come in. So we'll say this is someone who has a pustular rash. Pustular, as the name implies, means that, did I say pustular? There it is. And it's multifocal. Let's see, it's in more than one place. We said that already. And the person may also be sick. He's very sick, meaning, objectively and subjectively. He's in a high fever, can't move, whatever. Anyway, the person is extremely ill. We use that term also in medicine. The person is severely ill. So we'll say severe illness. And it's asking some other questions about severe illness, which we won't get into. And we've said this is a person in the UK. And let's put in one other element, which is coming up. So his monkeypox is already on the list. You see, it's the, let me move this one over. There I am. And monkeypox is a statistical probability of less than 1%. See, in other words, because they're still common things. It could be chickenpox. It could be, plain old pus. Some people have been injured or have little pimples and things that we see all the time. I'll put in one other element, which is coming much into the press these days. We'll say it's sexually the person is possibly a sexual exposure. Now, if I, there it is. And if I hover over the, you see these little pop-ups tell me what do we mean by sexual exposure, because it is a cultural thing and it may differ from one country to another. What do we mean by fever? A fever in England is different from fever in India, I guarantee you. Or a large spleen, which is something we could put in. A large spleen in India really is not the same as saying a large spleen in New York. So having said that, what do we have? Sexual exposure, and his monkeypox has moved up. It's now at 44%. And we can say this is an adult. We have that option. So let's see, adult is down here. Here it is, an adult. And you see what happens? We put in adult and things move around a bit. And it's getting closer and closer to monkeypox. Having gotten this list, there are many things we can ask. We can argue with the list. We can say, well, I don't agree with this. I always thought this was a case of Ebola. And I can ask, we don't have time to do it, but I'll say, why not? And we'll put up a list of diseases and I click on Ebola. And the program Gideon will say, well, Ebola is not on the list. Why not? Because it doesn't occur in London and possibly other symptoms. In other words, we'll tell you the reasons that was ruled out. There's something called the first case scenario, which is kind of interesting, meaning that maybe this is the first case of something that hasn't occurred. So I could ask, could it be Ebola if it is the first case ever in London? Maybe this morning is the first case, just as monkeypox suddenly appeared. It is the first case. We'll talk about that as well. And you can do other nice things with the case and send it on to people and what have you. On the right here, we can get information on the diseases themselves. So let me... and you can compare them. So I'm going to compare, you see, I'm asking Gideon to compare. I can put in any combination of diseases and compare them. So I say, what's the difference between these 4 diseases? I can ask, what is the difference between anthrax, botulism, and plague, and syphilis? And it will, any diseases you like, and you get a nice little compare list. This is a nice teaching tool. I do this a lot myself. And these are the differences between the 4 things I checked off, you see. And monkeypox often is a case cluster, and syphilis is very rarely a case cluster, meaning a bunch of people together. So these are, and you could have these as words, as we see here, or in percent. Remember, I said it multiplies out the chance of the disease and the chance of the symptom, that Bayesian analysis thing. So this is the actual number. There's a 50% chance that you'll have an outbreak if you deal with monkeypox, but only a 0.5% syphilis. So you see, these are the differences. As we'll see later in Gideon, you can compare drugs. In other words, you can put up a list of antibiotics and compare them. Which one is good for this organism, which one is good for the other organism. And it looks very much like this table. I'll show you one in a little while. You can compare bacteria, meaning in the laboratory, which bacteria is aerobic or anaerobic, if you don't know the terminology. But bacteriologists use that kind of thing to make their diagnosis, if you will, to identify bacteria in the lab. Now I go back. And here we are back on the list. And I'll get the list for, where's monkeypox? Here's monkeypox. And I went to ask about monkeypox in England. We said the person's in England. I could also say, by the way, if it's someone who came from another country, that was on the list as well. Remember the signs and symptoms list. I could say the person was in Africa a month ago, came back 2 weeks ago. There's something called incubation period. You all know what that is, but Gideon factors in incubation period. It says, well, that's no longer possible because he's been back too long, if you understand. So the little calendar pops up, but again, we can't show everything today in the webinar. So there's a little about everything you'd want to know, monkeypox in the UK. There are many charts like this you'll see later in Gideon, but you can sort on the columns. See, some of these were travel related, which had the most cases, the least cases, and some of these are very extensive charts, as you see later. And there is that outbreak. These are people coming back specific from a country, so these are not outbreaks. But here we are in that huge outbreak we just heard about. And this is what's going on as of June 3rd, because I didn't update this module. The notes for England, or in this case, United Kingdom, also, of course, linked to Scotland and Northern Ireland. which are displayed separately as countries. I call them countries here. They're biologically countries. They're not politically countries, but we can't, believe me, I don't want to get into that at all. And later, if you put in a case into the United States, you'll find Puerto Rico as a separate country. Some people may not like that, but clearly the diseases of Puerto Rico are not the diseases of the United States. So you have links like that, which we'll get to what you're looking at. This is a clinical link. Now, what is that as a disease? You say, well, there's the what kind of virus really is it? How do you catch it? And there are links. It's all explained. What do we mean by a vector? What do we mean by a reservoir? This is all technical stuff. The incubation period, which I mentioned a minute ago. How do you diagnose this? The treatment for an adult or a child. I didn't mention, we talked about vaccines, but in the same manner in which we got into the vaccine for monkeypox, you saw that a minute ago, we can get into the drug for monkeypox. Maybe I'll show you that later. And there are two drugs that are possible. One is an old drug that's cidofovir, which is good for smallpox. So probably is good for monkeypox. Nobody's going to come out until it's got licensed by, in your case, perhaps the FDA. We can't say that, but you should know that that's a backup drug. It's a nice drug. Or tecavirmat, which is the one everybody's been talking about the past week or so. There's that vaccine we talked about. So it's all this. There are pictures. There are something over 5,000 pictures. I can look up the number. This is a guy we had in one of the clinics. He was hospitalized about 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So we have, you see there's 7 pictures. The pictures are very high quality, amazingly high quality pictures. And explanation, what have you. The clinical findings, just in a nutshell, something about the disease, you see. And we can get into further detail elsewhere in the module. I mentioned there's a bioterror note for diseases that can be used in bioterrorism. I mentioned that Northern Ireland is a country, quote, quote, and Puerto Rico is a country. Well, we have a country in Guinea named Bioterror. That's a country too. And if you click on now, monkeypox is not considered bioterror. It may happen. It hasn't happened yet. And sadly, we have to have this in Guinea as well. The American Army is using Guinea, and they asked us to put this in. So if you're looking at, let's say, anthrax, you know that one. Anthrax is one of the big bioterror diseases going back hundreds of years. So we'll tell you everything you want to know, but not about England, but about bioterror, the country called Bioterror. And it works the same way. And in the diagnosis, it's a different kind of mathematics, but I could say people are getting sick and falling down and getting fever and what have you, and we suspect bioterror. I could put that in. So if I put that in as the country, the list becomes actually very interesting, as you can imagine. It wouldn't say monkeypox in this case. Okay. The map, fingerprint. I'll show you one other thing that I sort of like. Let's see, explore and diseases. And we have something here called fingerprints. Someone in Yale University, Professor Edberg, who passed away sadly recently, said this is the best part of Guinea. He would go around saying that Yale University was using it, and he liked this. This is a system that's being used for way over 100 years, and anybody who learned, at least in my day, would go through this. But I want a list of, let's say, all of the DNA viruses. This is a DNA virus. So I want all the DNA viruses that are found in, the United Kingdom. We were just talking about a case in London. This is a DNA virus in the United Kingdom. And you see there are 22 of those. And how many of those are transmitted by sex? And there are, you will never be asked this question probably, but there are 6 DNA viruses in England that are transmitted by sex. Or I can say, here's another nice one. What do I have here? Let's see. Oh, this is cute. We want all of the viruses. So Yatapox viruses, all the viruses, which are transmitted by mosquitoes in Brazil. Anyway, Brazil. Or you could ask all of the parasites which you can get from eating sushi in Korea. You could ask that question here. It's the same module. Let's see, Brazil. And how many of those do you guess? And there's only one virus of mosquitoes. Oh, sexual, I'm sorry, sexual. That's why it's only one. Let's see, the NE. Hello, word. That's what some of the viruses disappeared. These are all the viruses spread by mosquitoes in Brazil. Or I can get all the parasites or all the diseases transmitted. Let's get parasites. You see. So what are all the diseases transmitted by mosquitoes? And you can play around with this for hours. You know, it's a country that you like or don't like, whatever. And you see there's lots of parasites and viruses. You probably never heard of these, and do not say I made them up. I'll get one more. I just love this. So I'll do it for a second, and we'll get to something else. Flaviviruses. Flaviviruses transmitted by mosquitoes in Brazil that are carried by birds. How many of those are there? We do get questions like that, by the way, the guys that work on this. You should know that there are 3 flaviviruses carried by mosquitoes, transmitted by mosquitoes, carried by birds in Brazil. So it's endless. Try it on your own country. You know, try doing the fingerprint. Okay. Perhaps I'll stop here. Kim, did you want to go on with the stuff you're doing, and then we'll get back into another kind of disease and more of the charts that I'm showing you here. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for talking to us a little bit about monkeypox and stuff like that. I do have, we didn't get any questions, but I do have a question. So I know that we talked a little bit earlier about a really unique case that happened in the Midwest, which happens to be where I'm from, so maybe I'm biased, but there was a really unique outbreak that you said happened in the Midwest that was spread by prairie dogs, was it?
That's right.
So is that common with monkeypox, that it comes specifically from like what feels like a random animal, like a prairie dog, or is that maybe a
I can
one-off?
show well, it is a monkeypox outbreak, actually. See, people think monkeypox suddenly, came from the sky a week ago. It's actually an old disease. And again, for the obvious reason, well, it's only in Africa. Why do we have to learn about it? That's the attitude the students said, of course. And so I'll get to explore diseases, monkeypox. I'll show you that outbreak, but it shows you what can happen and what people forget, which is kind of interesting. So we're saying monkeypox only one in the United States. Oh, by the way, there is a worldwide note, which I didn't show you, which is a lot. It has sort of everything we're saying, but all the countries put together. How many globally? How many in Africa? How many in Asia? It's obviously the same kind of information, but all congealed into one note. And these are the biggest notes. I would ask you to look at those as well. So let's look at what that outbreak was. This is the United States monkeypox note. And here's that outbreak. See, 81 people. You see that? And I don't know if you can read the small print, but there was an outbreak. Nobody died, but 81 cases. It was in prairie dogs. And what had happened was someone brought in rodents from, here it is. It's a group of prairie dogs sold in Chicago that were infected by rodents imported from Ghana. And this is what it takes. And as strange as that sounds, this is how diseases get around. You open an airplane, there's a mosquito in there that was sitting in the baggage compartment from some country you can't even pronounce. It gets out into your community, and all of a sudden people get malaria. That happens all the time. So here someone's had the bright idea of taking a rodent, probably from Nigeria or what have you, and setting it loose in Kansas and Indiana. This is what happened. And if you ask the ID people, the infectious disease people, nobody remembers this. I mean, for obvious reasons, also, there's just so much going on. And if it's not Corona, why do I have to know it, right? It's not COVID.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I always love the weird cases. Again, it goes into that trivia side of me. Speaking about weird cases, we're going to talk next about some drug-resistant salmonella that was linked to Kinder products during Easter. That did happen this year. There was an outbreak related to chocolate where over 200 children became ill throughout a variety of different countries. So before we fully kick that segment off, I do want to ask another question with a poll because, again, trivia, I love it. So I'd like to go ahead and show that poll for you guys now. I want to know if you guys know what outbreaks have been caused by chocolate? So I'll give you guys just a little bit of time here to answer that question, and then I will pass it back to the wonderful Dr. Berger, who will give us some insight on those answers, as well as a whole lot more information about Salmonella and this outbreak that happened through chocolate. All right, Dr. Berger, it looks like the answers are in. So it's looking like we got kind of a splash across the whole board of all the different answer choices here. So can you tell us which one is the correct answer and how you know it?
This is a real scoop. I'm going to tell you something we actually discovered through getting with you. Never heard it before. This is the first place. It turns out that there have been outbreaks, 26,361 outbreaks in Gideon, meaning all the outbreaks on in PubMed. It's essentially any outbreak and by health ministries and what have you, because we do have all the outbreaks pretty much as of now. 26,361. Only 10 of the outbreaks forever in the world have been caused by chocolate, and all of them were outbreaks of salmonellosis. And what I just told you, nobody knows. This is a scoop, a real scoop. We went through the database. There is no outbreak from chocolate that has not been salmonella. Isn't that interesting? And it's not just nice trivia, but if you're a doctor out in the field, that from today forward, if someone comes in and says, "Hey doc, I have diarrhea and I ate some chocolate this week," you can say, "Well, salmonella, next case." You understand? Because it can't be anything else. You may have the first case of something else, obviously. You can't say 100%. But chocolate has never caused anything else. Isn't that interesting? And nobody knows that. Now you guys know, but nobody knows it. Chocolate, the choices that you put down were actually very nice. If you think about it, chocolate is not a single substance, and it has milk in it, or usually, I don't know the percent. And milk, of course, does have brucella, right? And so could it, but it's never happened. And I find that very exciting. Or if salads, you find that there are outbreaks from salads. Well, clearly a salad is not. Your salads have eggs and shrimp and chicken and God knows what goes in there. So you can't call a salad a single substance no more than you can call chocolate a single substance. But that's the fact. Never been you can go, you're probably all running to your PubMeds looking this up. But all the outbreaks from chocolate have been salmonella. There have been 1,974 salmonella outbreaks in literature, by the way. So, clearly the great majority are not from chocolate, but you had salmonella outbreaks, as you probably do know, are from eggs, chicken products. There are biological reasons for that. What's common is common. I'm going to go through salmonellosis as a disease because it's useful for us to use salmonellosis to show you other things of Gideon. We looked at diagnosis, we looked a little at vaccine. There is no vaccine for salmonella, as it turns out. We could get into why that is. We're going to go into, let's see, salmonellosis. And there we go. And here's salmonellosis in the United States. I show it just because it's a larger note, it makes all the points we'd like to make. This is one of 23,000 country notes. This one note that's going on and on here is one of 23,000. The disease in a country, how much do they have? How many are dying? Which parts of the country? How are people in that country getting it? Anything which are the outbreaks in that country? How many people do have it in that country? Anything you could say. So this is that one disease in that one country, if you realize what's going on here. I could look at salmonellosis as a disease before we get into the country. Again, you saw this already, but the clinical note, there's a nice cockroach for you. Makes a lot of points that we don't like to talk about right now. A little about the disease. And now we'll get back to the disease in the United States. So here we are. Anything you'd want to know about salmonella? How many cases do they have in the United States? Salmonella. How much salmonella in by state? Remember, these are clickable. So here all the California surveys for salmonella, all the Delaware's, Florida, multiple states. This goes on and on and on. These are the surveys for salmonella. Or so it's by state or by group, and again they're clickable. So looking at environment, there's only one for eggs. Environment, soil, you see it goes on and on. Military personnel, I don't know why that comes up with salmonella, but it's kind of cute. Who has the biggest amount of salmonella in surveys? So you see 94% of chicken in Georgia. There's another hint. When you go down to Atlanta, do not have chicken. And I hope nobody here is from Atlanta, Georgia. You see, because that's the largest number in any of the surveys. You can see that. And the safest thing, if you want to put it in those terms, is poultry in Tennessee, which is not far away. That's kind of cute. Okay. How many people die of the disease? You see, it's all, by the way, per 100,000. There are some 38,000 of these graphs in Gideon. We'll get into that in a while too. All the outbreaks of Salmonella. And I don't want to keep reading the titles because this will take us all day just to go through this note. Certain groups of Salmonella, species of Salmonella, cross-border events. We have this for monkeypox as well. These are all the cases in which there was an outbreak in one country caused by Salmonella in another country. We just talked about the chocolate outbreak. The chocolate is, if you don't know, it's in Belgium. The Kinder factory is in Belgium. So, you know, if you would see this on the list when we get to Belgium, if we did, it's coming from Belgium and going to your country. So these are all the cross-border events. There's no other place you'll find it, but just everything I'm showing you in Gideon is essentially one of a kind. You'll never find any of this kind of data. And again, all of the outbreaks that were from Canada, or all the outbreaks in the United States, because we're looking at the United States notes of these United States. So how many of them came from, here's the Belgian outbreak. See this one, 2022, this is the Kinder outbreak. One of many outbreaks where it's crossed borders. We're just talking about the latest guy in the block, but you can see what goes on. I mean, there's nothing new about having an outbreak from one country's food into another place. So these are imported travelers sometimes. Why does a traveler get on the list? If you go to another country and come back and have salmonella, believe me, nobody's going to count you as an item for Gideon. There are thousands and thousands of those. But this would be a group of people. So a bunch of people traveled to Australia and they went into a hotel or whatever it was. These are students. So we have that kind of stuff. Some nice talking points, outbreaks. These are all of the Salmonella outbreaks in the United States, one country. And we have this for every country. So again, all the outbreaks of Salmonella in Alabama, Arizona, you know, these are alphabetical, California, what have you. The outbreaks of Salmonella, and this would be for every other disease. There's only one that was labeled as two, as a barbecue. I would have thought more. Outbreaks in hospitals and so on and so on. And again, we talked around this kind of chart already. Who had the most cases? Let's look that up. Only because you like trivia. So there's an outbreak in Illinois, 150,000 people. I don't know how many bathrooms they have in Illinois. You'll choose the joke, but there we are. You know, what are the outbreaks from? Outbreaks from almonds, from birds, from cheese, alphabetical. Which Salmonella? Salmonella, many of you know, have serotypes, and the nomenclature is changing already. But Salmonella outbreaks, so, and enteritis is the most common one nowadays. Lots of things were combined into that name. And this goes on and on. I'm going to get to, let me see, anything down here? Just want to get through this quickly. Again, you remember I said if it's about Puerto Rico or the other parts of America that are quote, quote, countries, so they have their separate notes. So there's a separate note for Salmonella in Guam. You know, it's nice because people do say, how come you didn't talk about Guam in the American note? It's not a matter of politics. It just works out lots better to make it into another country, if you will. Okay. Get back up.
So if I can interject for just one quick second. So you showed the picture of the cockroach, the creepy crawly. Because I'm not as familiar with cockroaches in Salmonella. So obviously that photo was there. Is that a common thing with Salmonella?
Probably more than we think. Cockroaches and things like cockroaches, by the way, land in the food. It's not because I should say anything cockroach. There may be places that happen, but it's because it lands in your food, and it is really a vehicle. Its foot was in the something very bad, which I will mention. Then it lands in your food, and it's transmitted the stuff into your food. And you eat it. You know, so that makes sense. I don't know how helpful that would be a diagnosis. I think about it, but who has not had a cockroach in the room? I mean, or someone had a cockroach in the room, why should that be necessarily related to the disease he has? A guy has a cockroach in the room and happens to get Ebola. So he can't say, you know, it was because there was a cockroach in the room. So it might be misleading for him to say there was a cockroach in the room. You know, we've had this kind of discussion, and well, we'll talk about it. Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. Thank you. Sorry to interject.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Curious about it.
I'm going to get into another module. I'm going to show you what I do because it's related to what we're talking about. I'm getting into something called quantified. This is also very unique. There are 38,000 graphs. You've seen some of the graphs already. The 38,000 graphs in Gideon, and the graphs contain about 900,000 data points. In other words, the individual points on the graph, 900,000. And I didn't show you references, but there are references for much of the things we're talking about, actual linked reference I'll show you in a minute. And here I'm going to compare things. I want to see, for example, I don't know, United Kingdom. Here's a good one, because we've been talking about United Kingdom. And I'm going to compare some charts in the United Kingdom. These are all the graphs for United Kingdom. And I could let's say I want, cases. In other words, I don't want rates means per 100,000. It just makes a longer list. You can compare things per 100,000. I'll show you that in a minute because that's very useful. But I'm going to compare. I'm asking Gideon to make me a nice chart comparing. Let's see, United Kingdom, which is down because it's alphabetical. What if we compare Salmonella in the United Kingdom to Shigella in the United? Did I do that correctly? Shigella in the United Kingdom. And what's another nice one? Campylobacter in the United States. I think the limit is 6. I'm not even sure. So I'll put just those 3. And I'm going to ask Gideon to make a chart comparing those 3 on one graph, if you will. It's actually a chart. And here it is, generate chart. And there we are. So I can put in anything. I can compare anthrax in Kenya to gonorrhea in the United States. I mean, anything you want to compare for whatever reason, you can do on this. Something kind of fun. Okay, now let's do another one. So you see what's going on. I'm going to compare what else could we compare? Let me clear the table. These are time consuming to construct for us. Let me compare Salmonella. Salmonella. Just get the Salmonellosis graphs. See, it just narrows this list down. And I want rates per 100,000. I'll tell you why you're doing it. If you compare 2 countries, it's not fair to compare how much Salmonella was there in one country versus how much, because the population is much bigger. It doesn't make much of a point, right? So I'm comparing per 100,000. That's what I just selected here. And let's compare a couple of countries. So I'll compare, what's a good one? United Kingdom and Scotland, remember? Because that's another country for Gideon. So we compare Scotland. Did I put in the wrong one, I think? And what's another nice one? Northern Ireland. We have Wales in there too, I think. And United Kingdom. I'm sorry, Northern Ireland. It's not good to do these on a webinar because we're time limited. Okay. Let's see, Northern Ireland, so it came up twice. We'll move one of those. You see, it just came up twice. Northern Ireland. Oh, I removed Northern Ireland. Well, but just those 2 countries. So here I'm looking at the rates per 100,000 United States versus Scotland. They're surprisingly, I mean, I don't know if it's a surprise or not, but they're very similar. Isn't that interesting? That I can't believe that the foods eaten in Scotland are exactly the same as down south, but I guess this is what goes on. And here again, you can compare rates of any disease, or you can compare other things. You could say, I want to compare the number of measles cases in a country compared to how many people are vaccinated in the country, because we have those kind of graphs too. What's the measles vaccine uptake versus the number of people with disease? And it makes interesting points when you're trying to convince people pro or con, whatever it is, against vaccines. Okay. Now, I'm going to get into drugs. So I'll get back to drugs. Let me put this over here. It turns out Salmonella is usually not treated. There's a long story why that is. So there are places where you want to treat Salmonella, and it's all based on what I think is a very terrible study from Florida. But anyhow, so I'm going to look up as if we're going to be treating Salmonella. Just people shouldn't get angry when I say that. So I'm looking for drugs. You can look at the drug itself. I'll get into that, the toxicity, side effects, or what have you. There are 30,000 trade names in Gideon, by the way, 30,000 trade names just for drugs, antibiotics, if you will, in Gideon. It's a long list. interactions. Let's see. This one's kind of cute because nobody has this stuff. What drugs can you not take with cocaine? I'm sure you're worried about this. So you never take these drugs with cocaine. You should know that. I'm not asking where you're from, but this is it. So any drug that might interact with something. Let me get back to explore drugs. Okay, I want drugs that are useful against Salmonella if you were going to use them. In other words, in the laboratory, they are effective clearly against the Salmonella. You put it in a Petri dish and the drug will kill the Salmonella. That's what I'm saying here. The 84 drugs, and the definition of what I mean by susceptible is itself interesting. So these are all the drugs in the world that would be effective against the Salmonella should you want to treat it. But you can put anything in here. The drugs against, I mentioned 2 drugs before for monkeypox. Remember that we're not going to do it now. But there are 2 drugs out there, or what class of drugs? There are certain classes. So anyway, you look at the information. Now, what's interesting here is you can add, these are the drugs good against Salmonella, okay? Now, let's say I also want drugs that cover Salmonella and Yersinia at the same time. See, people do come in with combined infections, and there's no program that does this except Gideon. So there are 62 drugs that will cover them both. Or you say someone comes back from an exotic country, he has a capillaria, ascaris, and trichuris. And you can ask, I see these patients, I do tropical disease. And what would be good against, I could put them in here, but what would be good against capillaria, trichuris? Give me one drug so I don't have to fill them up with all kinds of drugs. And it will tell you what's good against a bunch of pathogens, you see. It's very unique stuff. Okay, I'll close that, close that down. I'll get one drug just to show you what here's one, I don't know, furazolidone. There are drugs again here which are used only in certain Asian countries or whatever. So again, these are not all your own household words wherever you're sitting, because you won't recognize these things. This is furazolidone is used. It's not used as much as it used to be. But what is how does it work? What does it do? What is the dosage, adults and children, what have you? It's all. You see this drug interacts with 46. Thankfully, it doesn't interact with cocaine, by the way. What are the side effects of this drug? You see in this, things that you'd want to look up. These are the trade names. Furazolidone, I'm sure you didn't know this one. It has 115 trade names, if you really want to know. International trade names. In other words, not just in the States. People do come back off an airplane when they used to travel a lot. And they will have a box of something and what do I do with it? Can I take it? That happens all the time. So you should know the trade names unless there's more information on the box. What is that specific drug good for? It's good for these things, parasites and bacteria and what have you. Another thing I'm talking, this is really the last part, if you'll bear with me. I've been running around with a word called Salmonella, and there's something here for microbiology. I don't know how many of you, we should have asked up front, many of you are microbiologists, but I can ask for what do I want to know about Salmonella. First, just what is the organism? Now we're talking about the bacterium. So this is the common one is this one here. A lot of people, a lot of things were combined into that name. So what is that organism? And see here as an organism, what is the phenotype mean? What does it do in the laboratory? And I think most of you would not like to know this, but we have that kind of information. What are the susceptibility to drugs since we talked about it? There is another aspect of bacteria, and it's this one. You remember way in the beginning, we talked about the signs and symptoms of a person in England with what have you. Now I'm going to put in the signs and symptoms, if you will, of an organism. Instead of saying fever and cough and rash, I'm going to say this organism is blue and bad smelling and grows in oxygen, whatever it is. In other words, it works the same way. It's that Bayesian analysis thing. There are 2 ways to do it. One, when the students kind of like this one, it's good for teaching microbiology. If it's like gram-negative, it asks, is it a coccus or what? We'll say it's a coccus. And they ask, is it anaerobic? You see? And there's a list over here. You see, that's the list of things compatible with what I'm saying. I will say it's catalase, positive. And look what happens on the list, you see? You see, so every time I ask them, it's a jumping dynamic list. The other place to identify organisms is the one I prefer, which is this engine. because people in the field would prefer it just quicker, for guys like us. So let's see, it's lab and microbes, and it's laboratory, and probably engine. So here, instead of that thing you saw, let me clear what was already in there. It remembers the last organism here. So I was saying, okay, I have an organism. I'll say it's a gram-positive, meaning that it's a blue color in the lab when you make a stain, without getting into great detail. It's mobile, it's modal, and it has no pigment. And as soon as I put these in, remember here's a list, instead of diseases, it's telling me this is a list of bacteria that are suitable, the same kind of mathematics. And at the end, I can say, why is it not something? You see down here, we asked before, why is it not Ebola? Or I could say, I can send the case to a colleague or what have you, the organism to a colleague. So I'll say it's an anaerobe, and you see every time I put something in, this list gets smaller and it's more focused and what have you. And this is the bacteriology module. There are some 2,000 organisms. One thing that a lot of people don't know, even infectious disease people don't know, there's a new organism being described in humans every week. There's a new organism published every single week in humans. And by the time that, and Gideon has them all, we get those journals. There was one like 2 days ago. And those new organisms that are published every week, believe me, are not in your laboratory. They could not identify them. By the time it filters down to your lab, it will take a year perhaps. And it's not in the books. When is the book going to come out about that thing that was published last week? So Gideon is the only place, believe me, aside from the article itself that described that organism, Gideon is the only place that has that organism. Perhaps I'll stop here. Am I running over time, Kim? Okay.
No, you're great. We have a little bit more time. We don't have any other questions coming in. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the QA there. But to kind of wrap it and fill the time, could you actually show us the why not feature, since we have about 10 minutes left? I know that things like Salmonella sometimes might be almost a little bit harder to diagnose, or someone might come in, or you might have a lab test and you might be convinced that it's already something else. So like how often do you see that being used, and how is it beneficial, like actually in practice?
Yeah, it's a good, we use this one ourselves, by the way, the people I work with. And I just clicked on why. I had that list of tests for an organism. I didn't remember what I said, but I'm going to ask, why is this not a Chromobacter effect? It's because I said it was yellow and it said it's an anaerobe. In other words, that organism is not on the list because I said those things. And if I were to put, remember the diagnosis module where we had someone with monkeypox, and I'd say, why is it not Ebola? In the case we'd have the element is he's in the wrong country, right? So he's in England, so it's not Ebola. And some clinical features perhaps are not Ebola too, like the rash, pustular rash. I would hazard a guess. We've said it's a pustular rash, that's not part of Ebola. So give me that kind of information down here.
So it's definitely something that would be a useful learning tool for sure. If nothing else, I mean, if someone's pretty new to the field, especially, being able to go through and say like, okay, this is definitely something that's happening. This is definitely something that's happening. And then for them to have an idea and then realize that they were not right, you can definitely use it as a learning tool, because then I could go in and say, as someone that has some lab experience, but not in the field of microbiology specifically, I could go in and say, oh, okay, I was convinced that it was going to be this thing. And then now I can go in and see, okay, well, why is it not that? And it's going to tell me exactly what's not okay, or like what doesn't match up about that particular pathogen.
You notice, by the way, as you were talking, I clicked off a few organisms, treponema, something or other, and another treponema. You're familiar with treponema as an organism that causes syphilis and some other interesting diseases. So I'm telling Gideon, compare this for my students. I want a nice little chart, and I'll get back up here. And here's my compare. And I still have these, so I have to take that off. You see, it's remembering what I had before. I was comparing those, which we don't have to see. And here, see, these are the 3 treponemas. And now we're talking about, instead of signs and symptoms, we're talking about laboratory tests. So this one, it doesn't have a red color. This one often has a red color. I'm being, lay terms. And this one makes something called, this one never makes oxidase. And this one, there's no data, you see. And you could put these in as you could for diseases. I didn't show you this, but here it's in words, Or if you prefer, you can have it in numbers. Remember the Bayesian number? So
Oh, okay.
this one is gram negative 15% of the time it's gram negative, and this one is 0% of the time. So it sounds, it's more, it's the same information, but it's science, and it's nice. And that's that Bayesian number, right? The probability that it would happen. And some additional, in addition to what I just said, I don't know if I can lift this up, but there is more about the organism itself. You see that? What does it cause? Some things that are not on these lists, some additional, it has a blue color, that's not one of, it's like saying a cockroach in the other module, we don't have blue color. It might be interesting, by the way, but we don't have that. A cockroach might be interesting too. Okay.
Oh, that's great. That's definitely helpful for students, for sure.
I'm not talking too quickly.
No.
Oh, by the way, it also does mycobacteria, you're seeing, it does yeast. We've been in bacteria, of course. So mycobacteria, for those that don't know, are organisms that are related to tuberculosis or leprosy, and yeast are a kind of fungus. It's one unit cell. It's one cell. It's just that the tests are different. There's a different list of tests. So these are different modules. And then I'll stop. Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, really, really appreciate your insights and all that information. And I did look further into this Kinder egg thing this morning because I got very curious after we talked about it yesterday. And so they started to think that it might be related to the buttermilk that was used in the chocolate. But then when they went to the buttermilk factories and stuff, they couldn't find Salmonella anywhere. So now they're starting to think that it really did straight up come from the Kinder factory that's in the southern part of Belgium, and they're not really sure where it came from to get there. So they're still tracking, they're still looking for any of you guys interested about the Easter chocolate egg Salmonella outbreak that happened. They're still investigating where and how this could have happened, and there are still some lingering impacts that are happening as well, which is pretty interesting.
It's an interesting point. They looked at, they found it on the machine in the factory. There was a salmonella, which was exposed to buttermilk. So they ran to the farms, and it turned out the milk itself didn't have it. It's kind of cute. Another interesting piece, we've been talking of two diseases here, and this is the huge outbreak, the Kinder. It's in Belgium, And it turns out the Monkeypox outbreak, there's ties to Belgium too. We talked about it yesterday. There was a rave party where they had another name for it. A lot of it started from people who were attending that and then went back to their own countries, you see. That was in Antwerp. So again, Belgium, So the diseases, I don't think one is connected to the other, but it's interesting trivia.
Yeah, it's definitely something's in the water over there in Belgium, right? Some bad luck. Bad luck, Belgium.
Nobody in the audience is from Belgium. I don't want to get bad vibes or whatever.
Right. No, well, we really appreciate your time this morning, Dr. Berger, and I appreciate the time of everyone that's attending this. Just a few little housekeeping things before we sign off for the day. Again, this is being recorded, and we will be posting the recording in the next few days. And we will be sharing that out via our email with you guys for you registering. You'll have access to it sooner than everybody else. And then we will also be posting it on our YouTube channel, and it will be linked out through our website as well coming up. So that's going to be really awesome. Again, thank you guys for sticking with us this morning. We hope that you had fun, you learned something new, and maybe had a laugh or two along the way. Otherwise, we look forward to continuing to work with you guys and see what you come up with and continuing to advance the fight against infectious diseases. So thank you guys again for joining us, and we will see you next month.